welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Zoning Board of Appeals, Town of Norwood, Tuesday, August 18th. Welcome to everybody.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so Tuesday, August 18th, 7:15 p.m. First case is case number 20-12. It is Mr. Stephen Lohr. And it is in regards to, why did I lose that? 23 Lenox Avenue, General Residence District. Request to Stephen Lohr with respect to the property located at 23 Lenox Avenue, General Residence District. Meeting will be conducted digitally using the go-to meeting. Participation may be accessed through a computer, tablet, or smartphone at such and such addresses. Everybody seems to be on all right. This application requests a special permit under section 5.2.2 of the zoning bylaw to allow 27.9 feet setback from the rear corner of the garage to rear lot line versus a requirement of 30 feet. The lot is 8,549 square feet versus a requirement of 10,000 square feet. Plans are on file with this application in the office of the Zoning Board of Appeal and may be viewed during normal business hours, Monday through Thursday, 8 to 4. So, Mr. Lohr, I do believe I have your affidavit. I don't know if we all do, but I know I do, so I think you're covered there. There is a small issue, so why don't you state your business and then we'll discuss that. So go ahead, Mr. Steve Lohr and Emily, if you guys want to tell us what you're looking for, that would be great.
Absolutely. First off, nice to meet everybody. Sorry it's under these circumstances, but I'm very glad that we have the opportunity to have this meeting. Basically, the land has been in my family since the early 1900s, belonged to my great-grandfather, my grandfather, who had passed away in 2012, and he left the land to my father. So long story short, my father couldn't do anything with the land, and he had offered myself and my wife, Emily, the opportunity to build on the land. What we're really looking for is just the opportunity to continue having the land in the family and build our home, 23 Lenox Avenue, with the special permit.
Okay, great. And I'm sure I'll speak for everybody saying we'd love to have you. Steve, the only issue that was brought to my attention is that I don't know if you consulted an attorney on this matter, but the only issue that was brought to my attention is you're looking for a full demolition of what's there now. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, the only problem with that is it's been brought to my attention that the section 5.2.2 that you referenced in the bylaw, that doesn't include, that's not for a full demolition. So I believe what we'd have to do is we'd either have to, revise it and start over again, or we could possibly, I'll talk to the other members and see what they have to say as well, but we could pretty much have you keep a certain, a wall of your choice up of the property. You can do whatever you want around this one wall. Okay, but in order for it not to be a full demolition, you have to keep one wall up and build around it. I'm sure you can be a contractor for this job.
Yes, so we have Paul Oliveira from Avalon Building Systems. They're a modular home company in Canton.
It looks like he just joined the call.
Yeah, Paul, would you like to speak maybe?
Yes, thank you. We can certainly try to all up.
Do me a favor, just identify yourself, please, and who you are and who you work for.
Paul Oliveira, Avalon Building, Canton, Massachusetts. Everyone get that?
Okay. I did, but we're having a little difficulty hearing you. But so are you looking to put a modular home on this site?
That's the, yes. Yes, can you hear me?
Okay. No, I can hear you. I can hear you. It's the issue we're running into with the section that you applied for. It's a technicality and it's a pain in the neck. And like I said, we certainly want you to be members of the town. We'd love to have you. We just have to go by the proper numbers and chapters and sections and so forth. So let me turn it over. I'm gonna go over just a couple of board members in case, I want to go over the board members to see if there's any questions with this, and then we can readdress the issue. But I'm gonna start with the individual who brought it to my attention. So I'll start with Mr. Riley. If you could, please, Phil, maybe you could elaborate a little and help coach him if you could.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The chairman is quite correct in his description as to what the section covers, what it doesn't cover. And unfortunately, the section does not cover this kind of situation where you're building a whole new place. The particular sentence within the section in 5.4 indicates that for purpose, I'm just quoting now from the section, for the purposes of this subsection, the term reconstruction shall mean the partial, not total reconstruction of a structure. So I don't know who, suggested that you could come in under this section and seek the relief that you were asking for, but the information is at least incomplete, if not incorrect, because the section simply doesn't apply to it. The chairman did make a suggestion. We've done that at least on one occasion that I know in the past, wherein we required a particular builder, John Marini, I think it was, to maintain at least one wall of a house that essentially was being completely replaced. I assume he did that. I don't know whether that's something that is practical for you to do in this case. The plan that you have appears to show a completely different structure than the one you presently have, and whether it's possible to erect that while maintaining and utilizing some one of the walls of the existing structure. I don't know. I'm obviously neither an architect nor an engineer. The alternative, if you can't do that, would be for you to withdraw this application without prejudice, and then you could come right back in. And I assume if you adopt that, well, I can't speak for the whole board, but I assume if you adopted that possibility, that the board would probably consider waiving the filing fee. What you would do in that case would be to come in seeking not a special permit, but a variance, both for the rear setback that you're seeking relief for here, as well as actually an area variance to build the house in the first place. Normally, area variances are rather hard to get, but I notice in this case that the rear lot line of the property comes in at a very sharp angle and obviously cuts off a good deal of area. I suspect if it was a straight rectangular piece of property, it has the required area. So that's probably is an option that you could do. I think if you did elect to follow that course, it might, I'm not trying to generate business for lawyers, but it might be advisable to consider the advice of a lawyer coming back in. But I think that would probably work. But short of maintaining a wall, I don't see how we can grant the relief that's requested under this section.
So let me go back real quick, Steve. Let me just make sure that you and Emily understand what Mr. Riley just said. Now, I'm also going to ask Mr. Oliveira a question first. Mr. Oliveira, is it possible to do what you're looking to do with maintaining one wall of the structure?
No. Anything like that. Usually when we bring in a modular structure, the structure is near complete from the sill up. So no, it's impractical or possible.
Okay, that's the answer I was afraid of. So Steve, here's the bottom line, and Emily, I don't think anybody's in objection to what you're trying to do. Okay, I think everybody wants to work with you without question. Okay, unfortunately, these things are very technical, almost to the point where they're a pain in the rear end. quite frankly. Okay, so unfortunately, I would follow the suggestion in terms of withdrawing without prejudice, which means you can come back in at any point in time, and you just have to reapply. Now, we can take a vote to waive the filing fee, which I would certainly hope no one would have an issue with, that it wouldn't cost you any more money to come in and apply for it a second time because of a simple mistake. But I would also suggest, because I'm not allowed to tell you what to do, but I would suggest at least talking with an attorney that would tell you, yes, you're doing the right thing, or let me represent you, just to make sure it goes through without question, without a problem. Because I honestly, and I don't speak for everybody, but I would assume that no one has a general issue with what you're trying to do. And again, we'd love to have you as new members of the town with a beautiful house. Okay, but unfortunately, with the technical aspect, we have to cover our board as well and do the right thing. Unfortunately, with the fact that Mr. Oliveira is telling us that there's no way we can salvage a wall to build a mod. I didn't realize it was a modular home. Maybe I misread something, but it's obviously not going to work out in that fashion. So I think the best thing, without advising you, but the best thing to suggest would be to withdraw without prejudice. Before you do, when you do so, if you choose to do so, I'll take a vote of the board to see if anyone has an issue of waiving the filing fee. And then I would just go back and make sure, either through yourselves, or you can consult an attorney to make sure you come in under the right section of the bylaw to ask for the relief on. And I would also consult in regards to the variance suggestion as well.
Can I offer something?
One other comment, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Mr. Riley, first, Mr. Oliver.
Let the applicants understand that the board isn't just being difficult in its own regard. It's also in your interest in doing what you're trying to do it right. Because you don't want to run into a problem down the road when perhaps you're trying to sell the property or something of that nature, and in comes an inquiring bank attorney where you're trying to get a loan, and they look at it and say, well, wait a minute, you didn't have the proper authority to do what you did here. We think there's a problem with the title of the house. So yeah, you want it to do it right so that you're protected as well.
I may be able to offer.
Go ahead, Mr. Oliver, if you want to follow up on that.
In regards to what's being built, it would be a brand and a garage. If we were, usually we build garage, sometimes we build both modular and stick built. If we were able to leave a wall up in the garage, then we could build the garage stick built, build a home modular, and resolve this matter right now if there's a wall in the garage, salvage.
Let me ask you this: is the garage attached to the house?
The way it's shown in the plan.
That's you coming in and out of my computer. I didn't even answer that question.
Just got a question. Oh, go ahead, Paul.
It is the way the plan is presented. It is attached. It's an attached 26, and we could build the garage stick built and build the colonial home or new home using modular construction. So if in the garage.
All right, I think I hear what you said. I think you said it is attached, so it would be considered part of the main structure, if I'm correct.
Yes.
And you could stick build the garage around a retained wall, and the home could be fully modular, which I think would fall under the parameters. I'm going to defer back to Mr. Riley to make sure this sounds okay. This I certainly wouldn't have an issue with personally if it all works out according to how it sounds, but I'm going to defer back to Mr. Riley and see what he thinks of that explanation.
I had some difficulty hearing the explanation. I heard some talk about leaving up a garage wall. If you're talking about a new wall in a new garage, I don't think that qualifies. I think you have to leave up one of the existing walls in the existing house. Now, if somehow you can make one of the existing walls in the existing house a wall for the garage and somehow build around all of that, then yeah, you could probably do it. But not if you're talking about just using a brand new wall in the garage as being an existing wall. Would have to be a wall, I think, in the existing house.
Okay, so your structure doesn't have a garage currently?
Tom,
Steve?
can I say something?
Absolutely. Jack Perry.
Phil brought up John Marini's, and I remember that. And I did a project with John Marini, and it was something similar to what this gentleman's trying to do. We could not use the garage, but we were able to do, we were able to keep some of the existing structure. It did not conform to code, because you have that issue too. But we got it that where we could use one of the walls. We substituted some of the old studs, and obviously with new dimensional lumber, and it worked. And the town approved it, and the building department approved it. So it can be done, but not by just the garage itself. But you can certainly incorporate some of the existing and make it work.
All right, so Steve, I mean, with that explanation there, I think it's obvious everybody wants you guys to succeed here. I think everybody's on your side. It's just the only thing, it sounds like to me, unfortunately, according to Mr. Olivera, and correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't sound like any of the existing house can be salvaged.
And I'm just going to chime in on that myself. The house itself that's up right now is in pretty rough shape, which is why we want to do the full demolition in the first place. I guess rather than, pursuing, under this law, which doesn't allow for complete demolition of the home, my wife and I want to withdraw the application for now and resubmit. And Mr. Brady, you had mentioned that there's possibility of waiving the fee. If we can go that route, we'd love to do that, and we'd love to reapply and get it right this time under the correct law.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the vote on that. I mean, I just hope you realize that everybody here, even though some members haven't spoke, I'll go out on a limb and say everybody wants this project to succeed. And I think we've tried every angle to try to make it work, but unfortunately, I just don't think there's a way to make this particular one work.
Absolutely.
So if you do want to withdraw without prejudice, I will accept that. And I'll take a vote of the board to accept that. And then I'll take a vote at the moment to withdraw without prejudice the application. And I'll do a roll call vote real quick. Mr. Mulvihill? Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Riley?
Yes,
And myself as well. So it's a 5-0 vote to allow you to withdraw to get the correct zoning bylaw reference to ask for relief with. And I'm going to do a second vote, same order, in regards to waiving the fee on the next application in regards to coming in with the proper zoning bylaw. So I'll start with Mr. Mulvihill.
Waive the fee, yes.
Mr. Perry,
By all means. Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Riley.
yes,
Okay, and I'm a yes as well. So yes, we'll certainly waive that fee. I think if you talk to Ramonda in the office, Ramonda can tell you exactly what you're gonna have to do for the future application in terms of whether you have to do another mailing or anything. I'm not actually not even positive of that. Ramonda, if you want to jump in, does he have to do a whole new mailing for this? He's only changing the application?
Yes, he'd have to do everything over again, including notifying all the abutters, the notice in the newspaper, as well as a notice on the property.
Okay, so Steve, I'm sure it wasn't what you and Emily were looking for tonight, and I apologize for that. Sometimes this does get very technical, and it is a lousy part of being a board member is when you have to do something like this. But unfortunately, we do have to stay in uniform with other decisions and moving forward. So it is kind of lousy, but we will certainly waive the application fee that has been granted. Everything else is gonna have to fall under your realm. But I can't give advice, but my suggestion would be, just if you don't want to hire an attorney, that's fine. If you want to just double check with somebody to make sure it's correct. Because of liability reasons, we can't advise you what to do, but if you want to double check with an attorney to make sure that, that it is correct that you're filing under, I really don't see, after tonight's hearing, I really don't see a problem with this project at all. Just more of a technicality, which is the lousy part of this whole thing. So, your application is withdrawn, and we definitely look forward to seeing you very shortly.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Brady, and thank you to everybody who helped us out tonight. So thank you.
All right, good luck to you both, and we look forward to seeing you both, and look forward to having you as members of the town for certain.
Thanks again.
Good night.
Okay. So, yeah, we got plenty of time. Yes, all right, the next case is David Ahern. David Ahern, you represent this applicant. Is, I believe the next case is case number 20-13 with respect to property located at 600 Nichols Street in an S2 single residential district. This application requests a variance under the general laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and section 4.0 of the zoning bylaws to allow A, the creation of two lots, Lot 2B and Lot 2C, having less frontage and less lot width than required. B, relief from the front setback requirement as to Lot 5, and C, such other and further relief as the board may deem necessary or appropriate in the circumstance.
I don't want to talk.
Plans are on file with this application in the office of the zoning board of appeals and will be viewed during normal business hours, Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Anybody who's interested in speaking on this, I will call on you at some point. I do see Mr. Roach, who I believe would be interested on this. I will touch base with you in a moment, sir, but I'm going to allow the board members to discuss it first after hearing from Mr. Ahern. All right, so just everybody be patient. If you could stay muted, I would appreciate that as well. Mr. Ahern, I'll turn the board over to you. And for the record, I do have the affidavit on the application in regards to the newspaper advertisements and so forth. So, Mr. Ahern, all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, David Ahern Jr., attorney from 470 Washington Street here in Norwood. I'm representing Paul Easy, who is the new owner of the property in question, 600 Nichols Street. Mr. Easy purchased that property earlier this month. What is before you, as the chairman read, is a request for variances with respect to two lots. We are asking for relief to create from an existing parcel that has an existing house, two lots, lots 2B and 2C, that would be in conformance with the zoning requirements as to area and side yard and rear yard, front setback, all of those dimensional requirements, except as to the frontage, which in this district, the S2 district, is 125 feet, and also lot width of 125 feet. The two lots that are proposed will have 111.58 feet of frontage and lot width, minimum lot width. It varies a little bit as to one of the lots because of the angle it comes out, and will make it slightly wider on the angle. Ms. Morgan has put up a plan, and so if you were looking at the plan that we filed for the presentation plan, we call it, the two lots are up on Nichols Street on the upper left quarter of the plan. And that's presently, there's a house there that was built probably 40 plus years ago, 40 to 50 years ago by Abe Shigori, who owned this property and developed much of that area. That house was on the market from last summer until Mr. Easy bought it earlier this month. In the time that it was on the market, there was at least one significant reduction in price. I'm talking about $100,000 in reduction. and there were no offers that came in anywhere near the asking price. Mr. Eaton came along and bought the entire property. The entire property had been offered for sale, as well as the house at 600 Nichols by itself. And that is with respect to the first of the requests, we're asking for permission to create 2 lots that are slightly deficient in terms of frontage and lot width. They have each of them over 89% of the required dimensions, but they are short by about 13 and some odd feet, less than 13 and a half feet. With respect to the second request, and I just want to lay this out, then I'm happy to take it in any order that the board wishes. The second request is for relief with respect to what we call Lot 5, which is located in the lower center part of the plan that's before us. And what we're asking for there is relief from the front setback requirements. We have a lot that has it complies with all the dimensional requirements. But because of the factors that affect this lot relating to the presence of wetlands on at different parts of the property, and those are outlined in a darker green, the 25-foot no build line and the 25-foot no disturb zone and the 50-foot no build section, we're very limited where we can put a house. Just so the board knows some of the procedural history here. Previously, this property was before the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission, and there is a signed A&R plan creating lots along Brook Street, 3 lots, only one of which is subject to this proceeding. There are also 3 orders of conditions that have been issued by the Conservation Commission to permit the development of Lot 5 and the other lots along Brook Street, the 2 that don't need any zoning relief. However, as the Conservation Commission was presented with the plan, the location of the house on Lot 5 was actually pushed back such that the only thing you could really have there was a house that was triangular in shape because of the limitations on the wetlands. What we're asking for is to be able to slide the house forward, which I think puts it a little bit farther away from the neighbors on Lancelot Court, and to have it only touch at 2 corners the edge of the 50-foot no build zone. This requires relief from the 30-foot setback. Now, normally, we wouldn't expect you to even consider that. But what's unique about this property is if you look at the plan and the driveway that we're showing, and these are conceptual houses, these aren't necessarily exactly how they would turn out. But we need to cross about 50+ feet minimum. And it gets even longer the farther to the right that you go in this sketch. We need to cross 50 feet of area that was taken in 1967 from the property owner, Mr. Shigori, for a proposed relocation of Brook Street, but never used by the town. In 1967, the county, at the request of the town, made a taking along Brook Street, widened it significantly on paper, because the idea was that Garden Parkway, coming up from Route 1A, crossing Wilson Street and dead ending, would be extended and connect to Brook Street. And so the idea was that the county, acting for the town, made a taking and then said to the town, you've got to build this within a certain number of years. It never got built. I've talked to the town engineer, Mark Ryan, about this, and he has assured me that there are no plans to build there. And in fact, he thinks it would be extremely unlikely that the road would ever be built that way because of the environmental rules that apply now that did not apply in 1967. All that land has been taken care of by Mr. Shigori over the years, all that green space. He mowed it, he planted on it, he protected it, he took care of it, even though it had been taken from him back in 1967. And so anyone driving on Brooks would see a house set back 55 or so feet from the roadway. when the normal setback is 30 feet. 50 or so of those 55 feet would be part of the taking. But the reality is it's never been used, it never will be used, and it's been cared for by the property owner all these years. So that would, my argument is that would not offend any concerns about density or about aesthetics or, and it would not intrude upon the public property. Going back to the Nichols Street situation, we have a house there that Mr. Easy and Mr. Paul Cummings, both of whom are here tonight, as well as John Glosser, the engineer who's worked in this project. They're with me in my office. But Mr. Easy and Mr. Cummings have looked at what can be done with the house. This was a house that nobody wanted to buy. It was built by Mr. Shigori and his wife for their use and their enjoyment, and they enjoyed it for many years, but they both passed away. Nobody wanted to buy it. And Mr. Cummings, who's an experienced builder, has estimated it would take a couple of $100,000 to put it back in shape. A lot of the sliding glass needs to be replaced, the sliding glass windows. You'd have to do a lot of upgrades. You'd have to change the style. And it would be pouring money into something that already the last year of marketing has shown nobody really wants to buy. It makes more sense to take this and with really minor variances, allow it to be cut into two lots that more closely approximate what the rest of the neighborhood has. They both have over 15,000 feet of land, and to allow new single-family houses to be built there that are closer in scale to the rest of the neighborhood. Any of you who've driven by the house at 600 Nichols Street realize it is a giant of a house. It is 90 to 100 feet long and nearly 50 feet deep. And it's just not something that people wanted to buy. So that is essentially what we're looking for. I've given you a memo to point out much of what I've said and maybe some more. But this is an unusual situation, an unusually large structure that is in need of significant repair. A lot that at 30,000 feet as we propose it and previously laid out as 26,786 square feet is much larger than any, just about any house in the neighborhood or in that general neighborhood. It is something that needs significant repair, and to require it to be maintained when nobody's interested in it really does create a hardship. And it was a hardship not just that would apply to Mr. Easy, it would apply to anybody who might own this property, because it really does not lend itself for today's needs of property owners, of purchasers, and it needs an awful lot of work. So that is what we're looking for. Now, I know there were some questions raised by one of the neighbors. The questions were passed on to me that somehow that there's some land missing, and I want to clear that up. There was a plan that went to the planning board with a slightly different layout with respect to these lots. And that's also the plan that went to the Conservation Commission. Planning board approved the new lots along Brook Street. Mr. Easy wants to create two lots out of one on Nichols Street. And to do that, we needed to borrow or take some land from lots 3 and 4. And that has been done, and they have been reduced in size by a couple of thousand square feet in the case of lot 3, and by a few hundred square feet in the case of lot 4, from what some of the neighbors may have seen at the prior proceedings with which neither I nor Mr. Easy were associated. Lot 5 is reduced by about 900 feet or so, 950 feet. And the extra land has been added to the proposed lots 2B and 2C. But add up all the area involved and there is no loss of land. It comes down, I did the calculation earlier today, and it's off by 1 square foot, which Mr. Glosser tells me is a rounding error because of the way the computers that draw these plans do the rounding. So it is the same land. As I said, this has already gone to the Conservation Commission. They have approved the development of lot 5. for residential purposes, as well as lots 3 and 4. And we're asking this board to grant relief that would allow lot 5 to be developed in a way that makes sense, not a triangular house, but a more typical house as we've laid it out on the conceptual plan, and to allow the replacement of an old house that nobody seems to want with 2 new houses that we think would be very desirable, very good, attractive and welcome additions to the neighborhood, and in keeping with the way the neighborhood is laid out and built out. So I'm happy to take any questions. And as I said, Mr. Easy is here, Mr. Glosser, the engineer, is here, and Mr. Cummins, the builder, is here. So they can weigh in, or I can relay questions to them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Why don't I go to a different avenue right now? Start with, Ramonda, can we take that off? I don't know how to get rid of it. Anyway, Packy, I'll start with you, see if you have any questions. Pat Muldoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Anybody that lives in Norwood or has lived in Norwood is very familiar with the Shigori property. And I remember Mr. Shigori used to have a nice little farm out in the back there. He grew tomatoes and he was quite the gardener. It was a big, big, expansive piece of real estate. I got somebody here, somebody talking.
Yeah, I think that Olga and Ted had to mute themselves because every time they talk, they interrupt it. They interrupt us.
Oh, well,
We're not even talking.
I know, but you make it every time you make a noise, it comes on. It clicks on
Even
yours.
if your name, even if you, if
Yeah, I
you
don't-
can mute that, even if these things are very sensitive, even the slightest move, it gets picked up,
how do I do that?
whether it's moving or even move it. Yeah, if you could mute it, that'd be great until I call you, but I'll definitely get to you.
Turn off microphone. Go ahead, turn-
It says it's off.
No, it's still on, and I don't have the ability to mute you.
All right, well, no, that's fine. I mean, I'm sorry. I've got a loud voice. I can talk over people. What I was saying was that everybody that's been in Norwood for any amount of years knows the Shigori property. And I fully understand what they're trying to do here with Abe's house by dividing it in 2. Mr. Hearn, what are the size of the projected or proposed new homes that if you prevail, that are going to be put on those 2 lots? Because the houses up there are, good size, and I'm wondering if this is going to be part of the bylaws, the visual compatibility component. Are these going to fit in the neighborhood? Are they going to look like other homes in the neighborhood? What are they going to look like?
The measurement of the houses, to answer Mr. Mulvihill's question, is about 64 wide, including a garage, a 2-car garage, and about 35 or so, 36 feet deep. So that's not inconsistent with other houses built in the area. And these aren't going to be giant houses. They are going to be well built. We think they'll be very attractive, and the size will fit in. They fit in very nicely. We're not saying that they're going to be exactly as shown on that conceptual plan that you saw. That was just for illustration of where you can put a house on these lots in terms of the building envelope, with all the setbacks being honored. It still leaves plenty of yard on all sides. So that gives you an idea, Mr. Mulvihill, I hope.
Thank you.
And
The request for relief on those 2 lots is de minimis, in my opinion, but that's for the rest of the board to take a look at, with 13 feet being needed for frontage. The peculiar lot that I have a lot of questions on is lot 5, and this is something that the board, like you said, David, and I think infinite experience, probably would have not tackled this particular application had it not been any other type of roadway other than Brook Street. I too had a conversation with Mr. Ryan, who was formerly the engineer, now the head of DPW. So he has, almost 3 decades of experience in the town. And he also reaffirmed what you said, that it would be highly unlikely for the town, the county, or the state to widen Brook Street at any period of time. I understand why you're doing it, because the projected house, if it were to be kept in its traditional form, meaning the lot, would be a triangle. Am I not correct?
That's correct. We have plans, and I think it was before the Concom, where the house would basically be a triangle in order to fit within the front setback requirement and not violate the Conservation Commission's requirements. So we're stuck between, not between a rock and a hard place, but we're stuck between the wetlands rules and the limits of the lot. And yet we have a lot that has over 25,000 square feet, over 17,000 feet of upland. But because of the shape of the lot, because of the wetlands, we're really in a difficult position, and you really can't put much of anything there unless we can get some relief. I mean, we can build a house, but who wants a triangular house?
I'd be curious to hear from a 25-year veteran of the Conservation Commission, now on the zoning board, Mr. Perry, if in his years on the Concom, if he ever saw anything like that. But in my humble opinion, I think it's solving somewhat of a riddle here. It's actually moving the home, or the projected home, away from any of the do not disturb and do not build areas. I don't believe the deck is something that can be in that do not disturb. I think Ramonda had, or do not build area. I think that deck might have to go, David, but the house being pushed away from the wetlands, I think, is a good thing. 5 feet, again, I don't want to be redundant, but it's something that, again, I don't think we would have even, entertained if we got wind of the application. But everybody has the right to pray for relief, as they say in the courts of law, David, as you know. And we have to listen to any and all applications. But I understand what you're trying to do. I'm just, like I said, I'm curious to see what Jack has to say regarding if he has any history in his memory bank of anything like this. But I don't remember another road that's 58 feet from the property line that gives you that setback. And again, it's a unique situation where Mark has attested to both of us, Mr. Hearn, that the town doesn't have any plans to do anything with the lot, or with the roadway. So that's all, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. I'll jump over to Mr. Perry if you want to jump in there, Jack, with any comments or questions.
Yeah, actually, I think it becomes a little creative here, but I have worked on lots worse than this, and we've made some things work. One of the things that I can't believe is the creation of 2 lots, 2B and 2C, having less frontage and less lot width than required. We would be approving non-conforming lots, helping create that. And that was one of my biggest things. And I know I actually did some work on that house for Abe Shiguri. And he loved everything about it and the lot. And if it doesn't work for someone else, maybe they shouldn't have bought it. But I would think there's something other than that may be able to be done. But one thing I think we should never do is, as a board, is approve non-conforming lots. Because that's what, would be created, I guess. And I just don't think that's the right way to go. I think it needs a little study. It worked for Abe because he was planting, and he was not trying to subdivide the property. He didn't want to do that at all. He liked the idea of having all that square footage, and he did. And he farmed it, and I wish he was still here. He was a good guy. So.
Mr. Hearn, you wanna respond to that?
I could never approve, not sure the board, a lot non-conforming lots. That's what we'd
Mr.
be
Chairman?
creating.
Mr. Chairman,
Jack, if you, I'll let you respond to that, Mr. Hearn, if you'd like to.
if I can, I appreciate that, and I understand. And I knew Mr. Shigori. I did work for him when we carved off the lot that the Majkuts have a few years ago. But times change, and when a house has served its purpose and the land has served its purpose, it's sitting there, and it's not reasonable to expect that somebody else would want that. Mr. Shigori loved land. He developed much of the land in that neighborhood. But I want to respond to the question about not creating a non-conforming lot. This board has regularly granted variances with substandard lots and has even created substandard lots. And I'll point you to the King case at 142 Rock Street that Mr. Perry voted for back in January of 2018, where you approved the creation of substandard lots that required a greater variance than what we're looking for. We have 89.26% of the required frontage and lot width in each of these lots. The King lots had 83.33% and 77.78%. They were more deficient. And yet Mr. Perry voted for them back a couple of years ago. And so to say that we've never done this or we don't do that, that's actually what this board has done in appropriate cases over the years. So, you know, there are times when it makes sense to allow something that would fit into a neighborhood, that would be an improvement to a neighborhood. But sometimes you've got to give a little bit of relief to do that. And that's what we're asking for in this case. The alternative is if this house sits there, nobody wants to buy it to live in. Nobody wants to spend the money. And I don't know who's going to go there. It's a house that calls for a family size that we don't see much of anymore. So some group might want it, but Mr. Shigori's family was unable to sell it, and they tried for a year. So I would ask that the board keep an open mind on that. And I realize it might require a little more study and thought. As far as Lot 5 goes, we're trying to be creative here. We're in a situation, this lot was affected by the taking by the county on behalf of the town that the town then did nothing with. They took the land. And if it weren't for that taking, we would have had no problem putting a house on what is now Lot 5. But it's been taken care of by the Shigori family for all those years. Otherwise, it would have been overgrown and unsightly. So now it's time to do something with it. And the smart way to do it is to allow some relief that moves it away from wetland as much as possible, away from the neighbors as much as possible, and allows us to make a reasonable use of the lot. So I ask you to keep an open mind on that, and I'm happy to take other questions or respond to comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome. Mr. Murphy, I'll go with you, and then Phil, I'll call you out of the bullpen. But Mr. Murphy, if you could go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hearn, I've never voted for a variance to create lots like this. So I was looking at this as memo. I don't understand what your topological constraints are here. There was a lot with no topological constraints. You wanted to make 2 lots. The only topological constraint I see would be in lot 2C, which cuts off at an angle, but that doesn't impact any of the dimensional requirements you need a variance for. So I don't see how you get past question 1 of the variance, where there are no topological constraints on this lot. As it relates to lot 5, though, I do see significant topological constraints. The problem, though, is that I see part of the plan you have here. It may be a deck. I can't really tell, but it's in the no-build zone. You also have a driveway going across the no-build zone. Maybe you let us know how you plan to put a driveway across land, if you have an easement from the town, or how you're doing that from the county. And then the only problem too is the variance is asking for significant relief of the setback. I mean, it's not, 15 feet or 20 feet or, 13 feet, it's 5 feet. And so right now the town has Mark Ryan said the town has no present plan to do anything with the road or with the land that they own. But Mr. Ryan's going to retire, and this, Mr. Riley said to our last applicants, this could be a problem with marketing the property or selling the property if it's not done correctly. So I don't know. I mean, while I would agree that there is topological issues with Lot 5, I still don't know how you can give a variance where it's only 5 feet of frontage, setback, front setback. And those are my concerns at this point with the whole thing.
Mr. Chairman, I can maybe provide
Go
some.
ahead, go ahead. I was muted. Go ahead, you got it.
A driveway is allowed in the no-build zone. The driveway is allowed. These are Conservation Commission issues. They've already allowed this in terms of building there. As far as the deck goes, we would, if this were approved, we'd go back to the Conservation Commission and say, we've changed the location, the proposed location of the house, and we need you to amend the order of conditions. And we've changed the lot line slightly and the area of the lots. We need you to amend the orders of conditions to take that into effect. That's a relatively simple matter as far as they're concerned. But a driveway coming off of the road is allowed in that 50-foot no-build zone. That's a matter of Mr. Glosser, who's here, has confirmed that. As far as the, Mr. Ryan will retire someday. The fact is, you should if you haven't had a chance to look at it, you should come and look at the site and the particular lots. But
I did. In
order to build, the first thing that Mr. Ryan said to me when I asked him about this was, we'd have to build a bridge. And the neighborhood over there would not stand for this. The people at Garden Parkway, they wouldn't stand for that, connecting the roadway over through their road into particularly the stub end of Garden Parkway over into Brook Street. But the environmental issues, the cost issues of building that. Keep in mind, this taking was done in 1967 when we didn't have a wetlands protection law. So you'd have to build a large bridge, and Mr. Ryan said, that's not going to happen. And as the town engineer, as formerly the county engineer, I think he knows what he's talking about, that this just would not happen. We'd be willing to take the risk on that. Frankly, I asked Mr. Ryan, why don't you just why doesn't the town abandon the property back to the property owner since it's never going to be used? It was taken from Mr. Shigori in 1967 and yet not used for the intended purpose. So those are all things we can deal with. And the Conservation Commission would weigh in when we go back to amend orders of conditions, if we're able to do what we're proposing here. The alternative is we build a house that's triangular and closer to the people. So that is not necessarily a good thing there, but I just wanted to correct it that we can put the driveway in there. As far as the deck, the Conservation Commission may allow some leeway on the deck. And if they don't, we get rid of the deck. But this is a conceptual plan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Actually, if you could, just one follow-up, Mr. Chair. So you didn't answer my question about lots 2B and 2C, though, about the topological. What are your topological constraints in creating those two lots? You had one lot that conformed very easily, and now you're trying to create two lots, neither of which conform, and it has nothing to do with the topology or the soil or the conditions or anything like that. There is an angle. I can see an angle at the bottom of lot 2C, but that doesn't impact on any of the setbacks we're talking about. So, because there's plenty of area, and so that topographical issue doesn't come up. So I don't know if you see any topological constraints here that get you over the first paragraph of the variance for the hardship according to topological constraints.
Well, the topography, I could answer that, I think, Mr. Chairman. The topography, the area that we propose is lots 2B and 2C, does have significant slope. By the time you get to the lower level of the house, you're at ground level. It has significant slope. This affects the maintenance of the structure. It affects the repair and maintenance of the structure. As Mr. Cummings has told me, a couple of $100,000 to fix this. The sliders are worn out. There are other things in the house that are worn out. It worked for a long time. The family was there, but they were there a long time. So we're dealing with topography with a sloped a sloped lot coming down from Nickel Street, down going over towards Brook Street. And we're dealing with structures on that lot, a structure on that lot that simply needs to be replaced. And this board has allowed that in the past. And I appreciate, Mr. Murphy, you haven't been on the cases that I would refer to as a somewhat newer member of the board. You haven't had that, you haven't been involved in those, but I wanted to respond to Mr. Perry on that point. So we have some slope conditions, topography here, a structure that is to maintain it, particularly with all the glass that it has. If you've been in the house, it's a sliding door. The house is full of sliding glass doors that Mr. Cummings says have really deteriorated over time. And the whole thing needs to be replaced. If we didn't have this topography, or if we could build something new there, we'd solve that problem. So I would ask the board to consider that also. It's a minor relief when you look at what's granted on other cases. Walters Road, significant, they had maybe 70% of the requirement. Morse Ave rather had, needed a significant area variance and had 77% of the requirement. We've got 89%. We don't need any area relief. I don't know why these are allowed in some and shouldn't be allowed in something like this. It will be a major improvement. That's why we ask for your consideration. Thank you.
Anything, Phil?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, well, just one more reminder, if we could be careful, if you're not talking, it would be great if if you could just mute your screen, only because something as similar as the movement of the chair or the shuffle of the papers is a distraction. These things are very sensitive, not that we mind, because we'd love to be able to hear each other, at least in most cases, but yeah, if you're not speaking, if you could mute, that would be great. Just not to take away from the individual who has the floor. So Phil, I know you're ready to talk. If you would like to take the floor, you'd be my, sure.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy is absolutely right. There is simply no way to get beyond the issue with respect to these variances that are being sought for lack of frontage. I don't have questions. I understand what's being done, what is attempted to being done, but I do not believe that the board is authorized or has the authority to grant the relief with respect to these variances that are requested. There are cases that say so. I'll be happy to go into them and discuss them. I think that's something that should be discussed after we have closed the case and we're having our discussions as to what to do. In terms of questions, I think it's clear what they want to do, but it is equally clear to me that they can't do it, and I'll be happy to get into that in considerable detail when we come to discuss what we're going to do with the case after we close the evidence.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Hearn, anything more? Dave, you're muted.
I was just trying to
You're
follow the
muted.
chairman's instructions.
Okay,
Can you hear me now?
I can, yes, thank you.
All right, thanks. I just, I'm aware of Mr. Riley's concerns, and there are some cases, and I know he's citing he may be citing the Perez case, which was very different on this. It was creating all kinds of nonconformities, splitting up lots in a way that probably didn't make sense for a lot of reasons. We're trying to create lots that are almost conforming, but not quite, and we acknowledge that. But this board has, on at least 3 occasions in the last couple of years, voted for substandard lots, houses to be built on them, having much less in the way of compliance than this. And my point is that the board has effectively, I think, changed some of the rules or changed some of the standards by allowing and voting for Mr. Riley and Mr. Perry have both voted favorably on the ones I'm talking about. King at Rock Street, the Walters Road House, and the Morris Ave House, which we're looking for more relief than we're looking for. So I'm not sure, we'll have to hear from people too. I mean, I think the neighborhood concerns should be taken into account. And I think that you ought to have an open mind on how somebody should be allowed to redevelop a site that cries out for redevelopment in the case of the existing house. And I don't know if Mr. Riley has an objection to the Lot 5 requirement, request there, but that clearly
I do,
is
and I'll be
affected.
happy to elaborate on that when we get into our discussion.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Mr. Chairman.
I do have objection to that, and I will elaborate on it when we get into our discussion.
Well, I don't know if my client has anything more to say at this point, or any comments, Paul, or? If you want to. Mr. Chairman, Mr. East here, and he's come into the room.
Good evening, members of the board. How are you?
Take off the mask. I'll behave
Well,
myself.
just identify, obviously, we all know you, just see if you could identify yourself for the record, please, and your address.
Well, thank you for this appointment this evening.
Identify yourself.
My name is Paul Easy. I'm a lifelong resident of Norwood. I live at 66 Walpole Street. And I'm the one that purchased the property from the Shigori family. And I'll tell you, I'm not really a developer or a builder by trade, but what inspired me about this property, it's such a beautiful setting. And I know Susan well, and I bought the property from her privately. And my goal was to try to renovate the house and maybe put it back on the market and try to develop only the lots. There's 3 lots that have been approved on Brook Street. One house is a triangular house. I don't know how in God's name I could build a triangular house, but if I'm forced to, I guess I'll have to. And the other two houses are going to be a normal size home. So there's going to be 3 homes facing the water on Brook Street. I want to put my touch on this. I want these to be beautiful homes. I want to be able to drive by this development and be proud of what's there. I feel that before I bought this property, I used my head and I tried to study what kind of relief this Norwood Zoning Board would get, what they've done in the past. I pulled decisions. This is before I signed a purchase and sale agreement with the Shigori family. I pulled decisions. I said, if I could try to take this monstrosity of a house down and build 2 adequate houses that people really want, if I can do that, I think it would complement the neighborhood. I know I spoke to the people on the right and the left. They didn't have any problem with it. And then the 3 homes that face the water, they're not going to be monstrosities. They're going to be beautiful, elegant homes. Again, trying to keep that old farm feel together. But I really can't do my job without some sort of relief. I'm not trying to, when I went to the zoning board and I did my due diligence, I pulled several cases. This is something that I thought that wouldn't be a problem. The one at 142 Rock Street. This gentleman came in before the board, and Mr. Perry and Mr. Riley both approved it and said, no problem. And they were looking for much more relief than I am. Some of them didn't have side yard, didn't have rear yard. Some of them didn't have area. I have everything except 11 feet of frontage. That's all I need. And that's not the only one at 142 Rock Street. There was the one at 5 Walters Road. Another applicant came in, asked for the same relief that I'm asking for, and this board granted it. And again, if you look at the signatures on there, it's Phil Riley. And I respect you, Jack and Phil. Please, I'm not trying to pinpoint you, but you guys have approved these for other applicants. But in my case, It's not, for some reason, you've changed your view or you've decided that it doesn't apply to me. I mean, there's at least a half a dozen cases, the one on Zero Morse Avenue, the Morse Ave Realty Trust. These applicants came into this board and they said, we need relief on frontage. And you guys said, yes, no problem. And it was much more stringent than mine. Mine is, in my opinion, it's not a lot. If it's 125-foot frontage, I have what, 112. It's not like I have 60-foot frontage and I'm looking for 80-foot relief from you. But if you look at these prior decisions, and you'll see that these were granted by this board. I just feel that, I just want to, like I said, I just feel that I want to just remind the board that before I bought the property, I did do my research. And I thought for sure that with the history of the board and the findings that I read, it wouldn't be a problem asking for 11 to 12 feet. I'm surprised, but I understand and I respect your decision. And secondly, with respect to the house on Brook Street, I can build that triangular house. It's all approved, but who wants to live in a triangular house? All I want to do is square it off. And even if you give me if you feel 5 feet is too close, then come up with a number that you're comfortable with, and I could live with that. But I would like to build a square house there facing the water. I feel like that even with the relief granted on that front setback, I'm still almost 60 feet to Brook Street. And like the experts have said, that was Abe's land at one time. I'm not trying to take any town property. I'm really just trying to do the right thing here. I really want to be able to be creative. I'm 63 years old. This is probably going to be one of my last projects. I just want to be creative. I want to put my stamp of approval on it. I mean, these houses that I envision are not going to have vinyl siding and vinyl shutters or white plastic fences. These are going to be all elegant homes that are going to make that neighborhood upscale. And it's going to be something that I'm going to be very proud of. So I know you'll go into your deliberations, and I do appreciate your time. Whatever you decide, I respect it. But I'm just telling you where I'm coming from. And I thought that the relief that I wanted tonight wasn't going to, be that, much of a problem based on, past decisions. Thank you, and I appreciate it.
All right, Paul, thank you for that input. Appreciate it. All right, I'm going to go to the, unless any board members have anything to add before we go to the audience, I'm going to go to some of the audience members that are clearly here to speak out on this project, pro or con. So if nobody has anything else to say, Mr. Roach, why don't I let you say your piece, because we did receive a letter from you, I believe, somewhere. But if you want to go ahead and say your piece, I'll track that down. Yeah, you got to unmute yourself, though, Mr. Roach. You're still not unmuted, Mr. Roach. You got to press the microphone button so it turns green. In the middle.
Well, your microphone's on now, but your video's off.
Yeah, I just,
There
That's
you go.
all right. As long as we can hear you, Mr. Roach, you can go ahead. If we can go ahead and do a test case there if you want to.
how about now?
Yes, that's fine. If you want to go ahead, that'd be great. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Perry and Mr. Murphy and Mr. Riley said everything I wanted to say. Said it very well, especially about the non-conforming lots. Should not be approved, period. No discussion. The 5-foot setback shouldn't even be considered. And as far as it being a triangular house, I don't care. And personally, I'd like to see the boulders moved back to the property line. If I knew 30 years ago that that property was the town of Norwoods, I would have asked for that years ago. And I would have been a pin in the butt. So that's really all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Roach. Mr. Wharton, I've seen that you've been waiting a little while. You want to add something? Don't forget to take yourself off mute.
No, I don't. I just wanted to listen in because this property is close to mine and I wanted to hear what the proceedings were. So I really don't have anything to add.
Okay. Thank you very much. I see we have a Mr. Godomsky. Did I pronounce it right? Mr. Tom Godomsky. Tom, if you could just say your name and address, please, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, my name's Tom Godomsky and I'm 608 Nickel Street. So we are the abutting neighbor on towards St. Tim's.
Okay.
So we don't really have much to say. My wife has lived, her family has lived in this house since the 1960s. She's now Nicole Maddox Godomsky. Maddox was her maiden name. So we just wanted to, just listen in on the conversation here. And I had addressed my concerns with Mr. Easy earlier today, just mostly about grading. And we just wanted to make sure that if houses do come into this area, that the grading of any of the land didn't affect, our view of the pond.
Okay. Before I let Mr. Hearn respond to that, do you have anything else?
Nope, that's about it for us.
All right, Mr. Hearn, you want to go ahead?
Thank you. And I thank Mr. Godomsky for his comment. Mr. Easy, I think, was in touch and has known some members of that family for a number of years. And he understood that there was no objection coming from the Maddox family, of which Mr. Godomsky is a member, and that the abutter on the other side, the Mashkuts, who bought lot 1 for Mr. Shigori, indicated to Mr. Easy also that they had no objection to what we're proposing. I would ask, Mr. Chairman, I think that it might be, I think a comment that Mr. Roach made kind of proves the point in some respects. He didn't know that was town land. Nobody would know it was town land, except we told you it was. Yet Mr. Shigori's been taking care of it all these years. All we want is to, from the point of view of how you look at it, nobody's going to get hurt if you give relief based upon the topography and the soil conditions, the wetlands that we have, and the shape of the lot for lot 5. Nobody's going to get hurt. Nobody's going to have anything really to object to. The house is going to look like it's 55 feet back from the roadway, which it will be, even though the taking of Mr. Shigori's land goes to within 5 feet. So the point is, from anybody looking at it, the question of density, nobody gets hurt on that. We really think that the board would benefit from a visit to the site, and our engineer would be happy to explain some of the issues that relate to lot 5 in particular, which is a more difficult lot environmentally speaking. And we're happy to take the board over to that site and anybody else who wants to participate in that. I remember years ago, we used to have group walks board on Saturday mornings to look at a site. That is a lot that we can build an odd shaped house there, but nobody benefits from that. The town doesn't benefit, the neighbors don't benefit, the property owner doesn't benefit. A little bit of relief that nobody is even going to notice the physical components of it. We can have a house there that fits in well with the neighborhood. So that's what we're asking for lot 5. I understand the concerns with respect to lot 2. I've said my piece that you've done this before many times and granted significantly more relief on this. And so the question is, and Mr. Easy finds it hard to understand why a board grants it to one person and not to another that's asking for even less relief. So I would ask, Mr. Chairman, that you keep the hearing open if there's nobody else who wants to speak on it. that you keep the hearing open to another meeting of the board. We'd like to show the board members in greater detail the actual physical conditions at Lot 5 and be able to point things out in a way with an inspection either individually or as a group, and point out, and again, neighbors, it's like a court taking a view. And the neighbors, if they want to be there, they could check with the office as to when it's scheduled if you do that. So that's with respect to Lot 5. With respect to Lot 2, I'd ask you to hold that in abeyance, and again, to continue the entire matter to another date, both to allow for inspection, to allow for us maybe to respond in greater detail to some of the comments, and for us to consider what our options are with respect to the application. This application is one application, but asking for relief with respect to 2 separate lots. And I think you could also take it up that you could grant one and not the other, or we would withdraw one and you could grant the other. But there are different options available, and I think continuing the hearing to another date would allow for that without any detriment to the public or to the board, and allow the applicant perhaps to either provide some more information or to give the members a tour of the site that would be helpful and illuminating, and then you've got all the facts before you when you make your decision. That would be our request, Mr. Chairman.
So you're asking for a request for a continuance. I'm gonna have to put it out to the pleasure of the board.
Mr. Chair, can I just interject? I think maybe if we could hear from there's a lot of other people still on the line, see if anyone else wants to make any comments before we go that route.
All right, give me a minute on that, because I'm having a little bit of difficulty seeing other names. And if I press the wrong thing, I'm gonna disconnect. So,
If you want me
Amanda,
to,
can you help me out?
I
You
can.
know what, Ref, why don't you call the first name you see, please? If you can go in order, if you could.
We have one now that just says Stephen. If Stephen wants to speak.
Stephen, just identify yourself with your name and address, please.
If they want to speak.
So Stephen,
Stephen,
may
don't
not wanna
forget to unmute yourself. Don't forget to unmute yourself if you want to speak.
no response from Stephen. Then there's a Catherine Collins, if she wants to speak.
Yes, I would like to speak.
All right, Captain, one minute, Captain, just the same thing, please, just for official purposes, if you could just state your name and address, please. And any further speakers, when you come on, when you're called upon, just state your name and address, please. Thank you, Captain.
Catherine Collins, 28 Canterbury Drive. As Mr. East said, this is a beautiful neighborhood. That's why we chose to live here. And we chose it because we had a beautiful open view of the pond. And we're concerned that this pop-up cluster development will be in our backyards and will obliterate our pond views, as well as our neighbors' pond views. And that is my only concern. Everyone else has spoken my concerns as well.
Thank you.
Okay,
Can I
thank
speak?
you.
My name's Chris Collins, Kathy's. Hello?
Go ahead, Chris, same address, I
Hello?
assume, go ahead. Yep, go ahead.
Hey, Matt. Doing? I just want to ask, is that 5 feet, is that off from the sidewalk, off of Abe's old house?
Mr. Chairman,
You're gonna have to answer that, please.
if the 5 feet,
Right.
there's no sidewalk on Brook Street, Mr. Chairman. We're proposing to build 55 feet from the edge of the pavement, the edge of the Brook Street pavement.
I'm talking about Mr. Shiguri's old house, those 2 lots in front there where he is now. His old house.
Right.
Then you got to put the 2 lots. How far back off the street from the sidewalk of these houses to be built?
More than 30 feet plus, Mr. Chairman,
What,
as required by the zoning bylaw.
okay, and is this going to set a precedent up in this neighborhood or anybody else's now that you can change any type of lot plan that you want? These 2 lots have been, yes, they are 2 lots up there, or no, they're really just 1 lot. You're making them into 2.
No, I can interrupt you for 1 second. There's no precedence that'll be set. Each case is decided upon individually.
Okay, now, Mr. Shiguri's house, God rest his soul, that's zoned for one lot, right? That whole area? And you're making that into 2 lots, correct?
Mr. Chairman, can I respond to that?
I'm waiting for you to, please.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep. Go ahead, Dave. You can respond to that.
We have more than the required area for 2 lots in what we propose. We have more than the required area, and the houses would fit the setback, satisfy the setback requirements as to the front setback, side setback, rear setback. So in answer to Mr. Collins, we have more land there than 2 lots require.
Oh, you do? Okay. So I know when Corey built all these lots up here, matter of fact, I've been living here my whole life. They are all basic standard lots. Aren't they 15,000 mostly every lot?
The zoning in the, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer it.
I'm gonna let it go with one more question. You can answer this question, please.
Sure. Most of them in that neighborhood, most of the lots have 125 feet. Some of them do not. Most of them have about 15,000 square feet. A lot of them were laid out that way, but there are lots on Canterbury that have less than 125 feet of frontage. It does vary throughout the S2 district. But in that immediate neighborhood, there's some variation on some of those lots. If you look at the maps that show the dimensions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. All right, Mr. Collins,
I
any
kinda
other?
lost you there, but thank you for your time. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Murph, do we have anyone else on the line? You're muted, Murph.
Someone named Susan.
Susan, you want to be heard? Susan, just make sure you're not muted, please.
If Susan doesn't want to speak, we also have someone named John M.
John M., John McKay, 24 Brook Street. If they don't have the frontage, they shouldn't be able to build. That's how I feel.
Okay. Thank you.
Then the next one, Mr. Chair, would be Olia and Ted Majkit.
Yeah, so they still on? I actually had them on my screen earlier.
Yeah, they're here.
Yes, we're here. We're having
Okay, go ahead, Olia.
We're at 594 Nichols, next door to Mr. Shigori. We're the ones that purchased the property from Mr. Shigori. We don't have an issue whatsoever, him taking the large home and making it into 2 smaller homes. Mr. Shigori was a rare person where he loved all the land, loved the farming, etc., and gave his products away. You're not going to find that anywhere here anymore. So it's really beneficial to the area that the house be removed and 2 smaller ones put in. It's going to help the neighborhood. It's going to look good. He's trying, from what I can understand with Paul, he is going to leave it open as much as possible. So you are going to have the green land everywhere. I totally disagree with Mr. Roach, who says, well, build a triangle. Who cares? Well, the town cares. The people of Norwood care. I'm not a Norwood townie, but I do care. So I think, I totally disagree with you because you should care what the neighborhood looks like, whether you look at it every day or not.
Hold on, let me interrupt for 1 second. The gentleman is certainly entitled to his opinion, as are you.
Absolutely, I totally agree. But we should all
Right,
care what the area looks like, whether it's here on Nichols Street, Brook Street, or the other side of town.
Okay.
As far as the other 3 lots, I don't have an issue with those whatsoever. Neither does my husband.
Thank you very much for your input. Much appreciated. Mr. Murph, any more?
I think the last one, Catherine Connolly.
Catherine, if you want to be heard, just make sure you're unmuted, please.
And then the last one, someone says it's caller number 5. It says on the screen. It doesn't say a name. If there's anybody else, I guess that would be the last one, Mr. Chair.
Is there anyone else on the line that would be pertained to the caller number 5? The wish to be spoken, wish to speak, rather?
I would like to speak. I'm caller number 5, Cheryl Doyle.
Cheryl, just your address, please, then feel free.
Okay, I'm at 12 Sumner Street here in Norwood, and I'm a town meeting member in District 7. I was on Concom, but I had resigned, and I just want to speak on Lot 5. The fact they're pulling it closer to Brook Street does pull it out of the wetlands, which does make it a plus. The only issue is that deck, because town council had gone to the Concom meeting and said no build in the no build zone means that, no build. So if he either cantilevered that deck or just removed the deck, it would be a plus for the wetlands. And that's it. The other 2 lots I can't speak on.
Okay.
That's it, Mr. Chair. Nobody else that hasn't been called.
All right, great, thank you. So we'll go back to Mr. Hearn has suggested, for lack of a better term, suggested or recommended a possible postponement or a continuance for a couple of weeks. Request, maybe is the best term for that. So we can either do that or we can close the hearing. I'll entertain a motion from the board on either or.
Motion to continue the hearing to a date be determined by the chair.
Okay, people, don't forget to mute if you're not speaking. Mr. Mulvihill has proposed to continue the meeting. Shall we, let me just double check with Ramon to make sure 2 weeks would be all right.
I don't think you can, I don't
No,
know that you can
actually-
meet weeks.
Yeah, the state primaries are on September 1st, so we cannot hold a meeting. Our next
I'm
available
sorry, I
meeting is
forgot the date.
September 15th.
Don't ask me how I forgot that. So
Ramona, can't we
September
do Alex?
What happened?
Oh, come on, man.
No. The state
on.
primaries are the state primaries. They are September 1st, so that is our meeting night. It cannot happen.
Number, please, I can't see you.
All right, come on. Let's get down to business. So it's proposed, there's a motion on the floor to move it to September 15th for further discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Is there anybody that's willing to second that?
Mr. Chair, I mean, at this point, is Mr. Hearn intending to introduce more evidence? Are we getting more testimony? I don't know are we continuing it for further evidence? I mean, he hasn't really said.
I'm not going to speak
Mr.
for Mr.
Chairman.
Hearn, but I do believe it sounded, hold on a minute, it did sound like he wanted, if people were interested in going up and meeting his engineer, the engineer could explain, and David, I don't mean to speak for you, correct me if I'm wrong, the engineer could explain a little more on how the proposal would work. Okay, but the motion on the floor is whether or not there's a second to Mr. Mulvihill's motion. So if somebody wants to second it, I'll put it forward. We're going once, going twice.
Mr. Chairman,
You gotta go on the motion first before I let you speak, buddy. I'm sorry with procedure. Okay, so there is not a second on the motion, so I'm gonna have to say that the motion fails. David, I will give you a moment to say something if you'd like to.
if I could, well, I wanted to respond to Mr. Murphy. There have been issues raised tonight by some of the neighbors and by some of the members that I think we should have an opportunity, and the board normally continues these matters on request, that we should, I'd ask that as a matter of simple courtesy, that we be allowed to continue this matter to another date. We think that the board would benefit from a site visit where the engineer can explain some of the issues related to the site that may not be apparent to the members simply walking the site or driving by. So I would ask that you do that. I think also the chair can pass the gavel for the sake of seconding a motion if necessary under the rules. But I would ask is, going back to this, a matter of courtesy, you give us continue it to a set time on September 15th. If we hope, we're not doing this to waste your time. We're doing this because we think that some further information could be brought forward and that the board could have a better understanding, particularly with respect to Lot 5. You've heard from people tonight, some of whom, not to argue the case, but obviously some of the comments that have been made tonight need to be distilled by us and to review them and to consider responses. And I'm not going to debate some of these comments tonight, but who made them, where they were from. You've heard from a cross-section of people in favor, some opposed, some asking for objecting because of view, which is not an appropriate consideration under our zoning bylaw. So that makes that objection really non-existent. But if you give us till September 15th, the next meeting, we could come back, I think, with some more information and more response based upon everything that we've heard tonight. And I think you've done this in the past.
I can interrupt Mr. Hearn, and I agree, just for professional courtesy, I would second Mr. Mulvihill's motion.
All right, well, unfortunately, the motion already failed, so I'm gonna have to entertain the motion again by Mr. Mulvihill.
So moved, and it has been common courtesy that we do allow this. I very, very rarely in my years have we not allowed somebody to continue the hearing if they want more testimony or more evidence or more professional evidence or
Mr.
testimony.
Mulvihill, I seconded it. I'm seconding it.
Okay.
Is there a
So let's-
particular time, Mr. Chairman?
The motion's on the floor. It's been seconded to continue it to September 15th at what time, Ramonda?
Sorry, that would be 7:45.
7:45, which I know that is an interesting, that's good. We got a couple of hearings that night, but 7:45 will be your slotted time. Okay, so the motion's on the floor to continue it to September 15th, 7:45. I'll go with Mr. Perry first on your vote.
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Riley,
I don't see what the point is in doing it. I agree with Mr. Murphy. I don't think the board's gonna have any more authority to do it in September than we do now. But, I'll abstain. If everybody wants to continue it, it's fine. I don't see the point of it.
all right, Mr. Mulvihill,
Yes.
and I'll be a yes to the continuance. So we'll see you September 15th at 7:45, gentlemen. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chairman, does the board, do any members of the board wish to inspect the property with our engineer, and any members of the public would be notified, could be allowed to come at the same time?
And by the way, that vote was 4 in favor and 1 abstention.
I've actually already viewed the property, Mr. Chair, so, I mean, I was out there yesterday and checked it all out, so.
If anybody else can
I'm gonna have to
notify
get-
us, and we'll,
I'm gonna have to get back to you on that, Dave. So what I'll do is I'll contact each board member individually, and I'll call you with the responses.
all right, that's fine, or Ms. Morgan, however you want to do it. Thank you very much. Good
Okay,
night.
Dave, I'll be in touch within a couple of days.
Thank you.
All right. All right, so that concludes the hearings for this evening. I'll entertain a motion to close. Yes, motion to close the hearing. I'm sorry, not the motion to close the hearing, motion to close the meeting. Sorry.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Murphy. All those in favor, we'll start with Jack.
Aye.
Phil?
Sure, yeah. Yep.
Murph?
Yes.
And Mr. Mulvihill?
Yes.
All right, I'm a yes as well. So 5-0 vote to adjourn. Just want to say, fellas, I do miss you. All right, I know this is crazy, but you know, I mean, I do look forward to seeing you all again very shortly with any luck. All right, so stay safe, be well, and I will see you guys on September 15th.
Over and out.